Is it, how did he open it? Let's see. Because I think he's just got it open. What is this? Here.
So it should advance page to page.
Oh, it's not.
Now you've done it. Now he's done it.
Why didn't you? But this should have a
Presentation.
presentation mode in it.
Oops. Please screen. There you go. And now you just click back and
Left,
forth.
right.
All right.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Okay.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The purpose of this special meeting is a review by the West Fargo Fire Department. And at this time, I would like to introduce to you West Fargo Fire Chief, Chief Dan Fuller. Chief?
Thank you, Commission President Dardis and members of the commission here today. This public meeting is being held as an update to where we are in the design and planning process of the fire headquarters project. So just looking at why, just to recap, the reason why we're looking at a building in this planning zone. We have 6 planning zones throughout the city. The planning zone we're speaking of today is everything west of east of 1st Street, south of Main Avenue, north of I-94, and as it connects to the city of Fargo to the east. Our 3 main goals here is to improve response times in that area, decrease our fire loss and rates of survival for serious medical emergencies in that area, and improve reliability of our overall system by adding staffed fire apparatus to our staffing scheme. All those were covered in the 2019 strategic plan and the master plan for staffing and facilities as amendments to that plan that came out going on 3 years ago now. Current 2021 statistics, simultaneous calls, we've had 178 simultaneous calls, and these are fresh numbers as of this morning. 178 times this year we've been called out more than one call at one time, so at least 2 calls at one time. 27 of those times it's been 3 calls at one time. We only have enough staffing to handle two-person calls. They are serious emergent calls, but we can do 2 at a time when we call back staffing to make sure that we have people in the fire station. Because we know and we've accepted that the only way we're going to affect any serious change on the rate of fire loss and the rate of preventable death in our community through accidents and illness is by having people in the fire station. We have to have a quick reaction time. You can't make it up on the road. It is travel time is travel time. It's pretty much a set parameter, and that's why we need a fire station in this area. 188 callbacks for station coverage this year so far, where we had 144 total last year, so we're up 40. We're going to end up having somewhere over 200 for the year, pretty much guaranteed. We still have a month and a half left. As of this morning, we're at 2,100 calls for service. We estimate 2,456 by year end. That's an 11% increase over last year. Response times in the planning zone 1, where the station's going to go, year to date is 18.9% for medical calls, 31.1% for fire calls, and 80% for effective response force or major fire calls. And that's a percentage, 90 percentile time based on a 5-minute medical response and a 5-minute and 20-second fire response, which is backed by the NFPA 1720 standard for professional fire department service to the public. So, just as a corollary, last year we ended the year with an 81% overall. Planning Zone 3, which is where the current fire truck, the full-time fire truck comes out of, currently is sitting at 73.8% 71% for medical and 73.5% for fires. And last year, we were actually at 81.1% at year end for medical and 67% for fire. So the fire calls have, we've gotten a little better time on that, but because there's so many medical calls compared to fire calls, that's dropped a little bit. That just points out that that one fire truck covering the whole city is pulling it out of areas where it should be stationary to make sure that it covers its own planning zone, you know. So again, reliability of the entire system is one of the things that we're working on. The building itself here, and that's, you know, the main reason why we're here, just to give you a insight into the design process. And we've had 2 public meetings so far. We've talked about, we've selected a design firm, EAPC. We've selected a construction management company, Kraus Anderson, and we've been going forward with the design process. The first few meetings of the team was the entire fire department, and we went through what should be in a modern fire station. Fire station design has changed quite a bit in the last, just even in the last 5 years, just recent history here. There's even changes that some people who were able to look into the future here are telling us that we're going to see, and we're making sure this building is going to fit some of those needs. We received firsthand feedback on the needs of the department, at least the design team from EAPC, and they've done, I'd have to say, they've done an outstanding job meeting with us on Wednesdays, going through this entire process. Nothing in the building is a want. It's all need. We've been able to go through and trim and find areas that we can find efficiencies to make sure the building is going to work for the people over my right shoulder. They are the ones who are going to be living and working in this building. So between their needs and the modern ideas of what a fire station should be, the combined effort and the combined product is what you're going to see here. That's going to be the most state-of-the-art modern fire station in the state of North Dakota, hands down. As we moved forward out of those first couple meetings where we had the entire department in, we kind of scaled back the group to just the command staff and went through some of the fine, intricate details of what this station needs to have. We've reviewed current standards for firefighter health and safety. The old days of having a fire station where we have fire trucks parked in a bay with no exhaust, no way to get rid of the diesel exhaust, turnout gear sitting on the side of the bay that's off-gassing, carcinogens, even after a fire, that stuff comes, you know, you take that stuff off, put it back in this fire station, it's still letting loose of all the carcinogens that are on there, and then having firefighters walking around with a cup of coffee. I'm guilty of it my entire career, having a cup of coffee and walking through the apparatus bay, looking at stuff, touching something, picking something up later and eating it. You know, firefighter cancer rates are through the roof compared to what the normal general population has. I had some numbers and I didn't bring them with me, but I just saw some updated stuff from the Firefighter Cancer Support Network saying, you know, at least over one-fold increase in a lot of firefighter cancers: prostate, stomach, testicular, breast, brain, malignant melanoma, very high rates right now. And we know it's from the environment we work in, and we can't control the environment on scene, but we can control how we respond and how we safely decontaminate ourselves once we get back to the fire station, and that is part of this plan. The last point I'd like to make, this building is large. It's larger than any building we have right now. And we did that on purpose to make sure we have office space for the next 20 years. We have living quarters for the next 20 years. And we have enough room for the fire trucks for the next 20 years. So I'm not coming back to you and saying that we need to add on to this building in 6 or 7 or 10 years. Guaranteed, if I do that, it's going to be a higher rate of construction than it is now, just through inflation like we're seeing. $1 today is less of a value of $1 in 2029 or 2032. So I think we've done our due diligence in making sure that the building is going to meet our needs for the foreseeable future. So with that, I'd have Alan Dossert from EAPC come up, and he's going to walk through the building and some of our design plans, and just so it's out there, and answer any questions that y'all might have.
Thank you, Chief. Good morning, Mr. Dossert. Welcome.
Thank you. Again, Alan Dostert, I'm the president and CEO of the APC. Love to walk through the project with you. I don't know how much time you want to spend on the details, but I'll try to be pretty brief, but explain it as best I can. We'll start with this site plan. This site is bounded by 10th Avenue on the north, more engineering on the west, and some residential development on the east, and Menards is directly to the south. Okay, we are entering off of 10th, so this site, it is a little bit of a drawback in the fact that we do have a north entrance, but it's what we have, and we can deal with that, and we deal with that on facilities all the time. The site is basically set up so that we have enough of a radius that we can bring trucks in and safely pull completely off the street and back into the facility, so we don't have to stop traffic. It's one of the classic things you see in older design where they pull up to the station, someone jumps out of the truck, they stop traffic, the truck pulls out in the street and backs in. We don't have any of that in this location. We pulled the building far enough to the south so that we have that clearance in the apron to safely back into the building without having any major maneuvering problems. The building itself is I'll just kind of do some circles here with the little cursor here. We have a public component, which has training, lobby, entry, and sort of a historical sort of bay for some vintage apparatus. We have the quarters in the back, and then we have the apparatus bay. And I'll go through the plans really quick. There's a lower level. There's secure parking and storage and mechanical space in the lower level and a ramp that access that. This is the real working part of the station. And again, this area in the front is public space. We have a training room that's subdivided into 3 smaller breakout rooms if we need it. We have smaller rooms that support that. And it's connected off of a public hallway or lobby surge space. And that is set up so that we could do press releases and bring the public in and have sort of that public accommodation, waiting, and reception area. This little area up in the blue here is that vintage historical piece with vintage artifacts, the fire truck and other things to put on display and celebrate. This being the front entrance. This little component over here is really not an addition to the building. It is a covered area, but it's a patio, and that is directly off the living quarters. And this column of space is things like your kitchen, your living, your day room, your exercise rooms, those sort of living functions outside of the sleep rooms. So they're all clustered here, so there's quick access, they can grill, they can do those sort of things. It's just a classic cultural thing with fire stations is that in the summer they grill, and if you don't make that access convenient and work for them, it's always a problem. So we're working around that, making sure the site works for that. Then in this center block, you have the quarters of the sleep rooms. And then, of course, this larger area that's sort of rust-colored, that's the apparatus bay and support spaces. One of the things I lament in this presentation, I don't have color-coded for you, is the hot, warm, cold approach to fire station design. We assume the apparatus bay is a hot space, and by hot we mean it has contaminants. It's on site, it brings those contaminants back from the site, and the key to successful design and to help mitigate some of those exposures to the firefighters that Chief spoke about is making sure we minimize the amount of traffic that goes from a green space or a cool space to a warm space. So we always try to have transitional zones so that those contaminants are not carried back into the sleeping quarters and the living quarters. And we do that with some vestibules, and we do that with a very carefully controlled both egress or process into the response. So when they come through as a response and they stage their turnouts and they bring their turnouts back, we never are bringing contaminated turnouts or their gear into the facility. And there's a redundant set of turnouts, so if there is soiling and contamination and volatile materials that are spread onto their turnouts, they can immediately be cleaned and staged with a new set while in case they have a response. So this is a very convenient staging area so that turnover of their equipment can happen, their turnouts, so that they're never having to wear contaminated gear. On the way back, they come through and there's a unisex sort of locker room, changing room with private bathrooms and private stalls and sauna, so that there's the ability to draw those contaminants out of the system, out of the pores, and so the body can really get cleansed of any exposures it might have. So that's sort of a process going out to respond and a process coming back, and that's a very important part of the design today, is to make sure that we can make these facilities as safe as possible. The other component that the chief didn't talk about too much, but we also talk about things, the first responder syndrome. We not only have the cancer exposure, but first responder syndrome is a situation where you have a higher than the public average of suicides in first response activities, whether it be ambulance, fire, police, whatever. So how do we respond to that? We respond to that by making the space safe and warm and more home-like, because this is their home when they're here. This is where they live. So rather than an institutional office-type setting for their quarters, this is their home. So we try to incorporate natural materials, natural lighting, daylight, those sort of things. And we do soft startups for like the alarms and things like that, so that there's an ability to realize the circadian rhythm. So you realize when it's night and day. You may have been on 2 or 3 calls and you don't know, is it 2 o'clock in the morning? Is it 4 o'clock in the afternoon? But because there's natural light, there's a acknowledgement of what time of the day it is, so your body can always come back to a normal circadian rhythm. It's an important thing. I'll quickly look at the upper floor. Wrong direction. The upper floor is primarily turned over to the administrative offices, conference room, and support facilities, if you will, on the business side of the fire department. We also have an upper mezzanine area, which will have storage and mechanical that supports the apparatus bay. So with that, I'll kind of, this is the look that we have going at this point. This is the elevation that faces 10th. So you have your apparatus doors. We are using the quick response doors to help with the overall response time. So these are very fast acting, very durable, and very dependable doors. So from this line over, you see the apparatus bay and the hose tower. And from this line over, you're really looking at the quarters and the administrative component of the building. Again, this is the side that faces the parking lot. This is your front entrance. This little area is covered exterior, I'll call it a courtyard for outside living, grilling, those sort of things that the firefighters will do. Keeping in mind, once again, this is where they live, even if there isn't a response, and they are on call and they're on duty, but they're still living there 24/7. These are some of the renderings. The front area, we're working on a sort of a memorial plaza. This got a little bit larger than we had planned. We're going to shrink that back a little bit, but it gives you a feel for what we're trying to do to create a sense of arrival and a sense of a memorial plaza that ties into the historical and the vintage component of the oops, I'm sorry. I'll leave that up for you so you can take the picture. So it just ties the arrival sequence into the building, into the public space, and into that sort of museum and vintage storage space. This is same basic view at night. We want to, like it or not, more hours of the year are spent in darkness around here than light, it feels like. And so we want to make sure the building presents itself well at night and at dusk. And it's occupied 24/7. So we do feel it's important to show renderings such as this as well. This is a view from the northeast, anchored by the hose tower and training tower. It's a combination of hose drying and training. There'd be shutters on the outside of that so they can, of the tower, so they can do rappelling and do training from going out one opening and come back in another. And it's everything we do on a station like this, we're always looking for opportunities to do training. You may have a training center, you may have areas where you can go for that, but during the day, if the building affords itself those opportunities, that training opportunity is there all day, every day for them, whether it be confined space training, as simple as putting a manhole in the second floor mezzanine, and they can set up a tripod and do practice rescues that way. It's inside the building. You can do that training 24/7, 365. They don't have to worry about the weather and those sort of things. That's just one of the things that we do, along with making the hose tower a training opportunity as well. So you can see the apparatus bays and the response, and this is how they would come in. They'd come out this way and then back into the area. There is some green space to the east of the building that's being held. If there is an ambulance or another component, there is room on the site to do some additional things at this point. There's nothing programmed at this time for that space, but we always want to leave space for expansion or for other opportunities on the site. Another view of that direction. This is the view of the building at night from the northeast corner. And this is an important piece. This is looking at the facility from a further east from the residential side. The chief has made a staunch promise to the residents and to that housing complex that we're going to impact them the least amount we possibly can. So we have a buffer yard on that east side. It's bermed. It will have significant amount of plantings, and it'll also have sort of a segmented fence to make sure that the lights from the equipment and those sort of things are screened from going into their windows, into their yards. We are really set up so the circulation doesn't have any lights. No one drives directly at those buildings. They go into the building from the north and they immediately turn and head west and they back in the building. So there shouldn't be a large amount of distraction for those people in terms of the headlights of the equipment and that sort of thing, sort of intruding on their lives. So we've been very, very proactive in trying to protect that east border. And that's the extent of my presentation. Any questions?
Any questions for the gentleman? Not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great. Just in closing, a couple of things I'd like to point out also, and I went back and found all those numbers since I did quote the firefighter cancer rates. We're over the general population cancer occurrences for pretty much every prostate, colon, leukemia, malignant melanoma, brain, skin, and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and then over 2% higher for testicular cancer among male firefighters. So the work we're doing to make sure that we're incorporating clean areas and able to decon equipment and firefighters and uniforms and apparatus and keeping it out of the area is super important. These numbers are because we didn't pay attention to this in the 90s and the early 2000s, and it really snuck up on us as a career field. So our next steps here, we're going to be going before the preview committee, the review committee for planning and zoning, commission on. We were going to go before the commission on the next meeting, which would be next Monday on the 15th. We're going to end up having to push that back till December, to the first one of December, just so everyone knows. So, and it's just because we caught a little bit of a hiccup with the scheduling of the preview and the review stuff. So, it's not going to affect the overall timeline of the project. We have some time built in. The traffic light at 10th and 9th, I'd like to speak to that also, just wrap it into the concept of this project. One thing I did here, I did some legwork earlier in the year. Like I actually physically got out and went door to door to all the neighbors. Everyone was really happy to see this lot turned into something that's a good civic building. It's going to be a great asset for the community and the city of West Fargo. But one concern amongst all of them was, even now, before we even start building, is they're having a hard time making a left-hand turn out of that off of 10th Avenue onto 9th Street, especially during certain times of the day. High school lets out, rush hour and such. So given that we're going to be looking at up to 1,200 times a year be traveling through that intersection with a fire truck, we need some sort of signalized warning there to stop people on 9th, at least to help us. There's probably a way to help us and help the community. Mr. Scott, our engineer, I like saying that from Star Trek, Mr. Scott, the engineer, and then Mr. Solberg, our assistant city administrator and current acting planning director. They're going to be talking about that and how we can get that funded and what the warrants are for that process. But we've been working closely with them on how the impacts are going to be. So just so everyone knows that that's something we're going to try to work into this. Lastly, the actual cost of the building. We do have an estimate, but we're working right now to try to get that estimate down and find efficiencies in the building process and what our costs are. So we don't have the entire commission here, and this isn't an actual commission meeting, so the debate on this really should happen at the commission meeting. I think that's what we're going to hold off on those numbers until the December commission meeting. And also, so we know exactly what vehicle we are going to look at for funding and what the numbers are. So we're still working on that, and that's going to come up in the next 3 weeks. We'll probably have a good idea before Thanksgiving, but we'll wait till the December meeting and let the public debate happen about how this should be funded. So with that, any questions for me?
Questions for the chief? Please, Mr. Simmons.
Thanks, Mayor. Chief, I guess one concern or question I have is I know you mentioned 1,200 calls, and obviously in our part of the country, a lot of those are going to be in the dark. Mm-hmm. And so my concern is if you're coming from the west, you're heading east and you're going to turn into this roadway, I'm concerned that a lot of the light is going to get through. No, I'm sorry, go back. Yeah, a lot of the light is going to get through there onto those residents and into their windows at 1, 2, 3, 4 in the morning. Yep. How are we going to mitigate that? I mean, would we not be better to put, a complete fence line so that light doesn't come through?
I'm not sure if a complete fence line, barring any trees, are gonna. Oh, go ahead.
I'll just go back to the site plan real quick, if I can. I think this is that buffer that's coming across here, and we want to make sure we pull that buffer as close to the sidewalk as we possibly can. So we're going to do what we can to make sure that that is as far north as we can physically get it safely and still leave the sidewalk there. And the fence line is broken, but it's alternating, and so it overlaps.
So you feel confident that we're not going to get calls from them?
We're working hard to make sure we don't.
Okay.
Very hard.
Okay, because we need to be cognizant of that, I guess, and make sure that we, meditate the best we can and mediate the best we can.
We in fact made this berm a little bit bigger than we originally had because Chief was he's been making sure that's an important part of our concerns on this is that you're right, as you come in and you swing this way, we want to make sure that area is not inundated with the headlights and
Yeah, and I know the chief's all over it. We've had a lot of conversations, so he's done a great job talking to that neighborhood, and it's awesome that they're on board. With all the years we've gone through different projects over there, it's somewhat been difficult at times, so.
And these are still a little bit preliminary. We may have to make a little bit more of a node of some taller plantings, some things there, just to make extra sure that initial turn doesn't cause a problem.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Additional questions? Thank you. Well, you're right. We're taking a look at all of the possible revenue sources of how this could be funded and the like. And the plan looks like a state-of-the-art fire department, which we'd want nothing less for the men and women that serve our community. So we're grateful to EAPC and their expertise and their knowledge and their attention to the details, along with your expertise, Chief, and that of your fellow workers. This is a major construction project for the city of West Fargo, and so there'll be lots of discussions going forward on the hows and the how-nots to finance this. So we would welcome the public to fully engage in that. But rest assured, the deconning area and the things like that items that we can't possibly skimp on, so we're well aware of that. We're very appreciative of your service to our community, all of you. Commissioners, anything else?
No, thank you.
No?
No,
Thank you, Chief.
good job.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
EAPC, Mr. Dossett, thank you very much. We stand adjourned.